Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Michael Weir. I'm a technical marketing engineer here at Ingram Micro. Today we're going to talk about the changes to PCI DSS coming through for version 4.0. Just a couple of sections today. First we're going to talk about a timeline of the changes, and we're going to talk about the major changes and some implementation on top of them. So first let's look at the timeline. So the final documents related to PCI version 4.0 were made final in December of 2021. And the official transition start date is March of 2022, which of course just happened. The documents and training to help you get to this new standard, for whatever reason you have, will be released in June of 2022, and the whole transition is expected to be completed by March 2024, with the future dated stuff completed March 2025. So future dated in this case, as I understand, is basically the get out of jail free card. We'll get into that a little bit later, though, as we talk about the major changes. So when you're talking about changes to PCI, you're really talking about three different types of things. There's what they call structure or format, there's clarification or guidance, and there's evolving requirement, which in this case pretty much means new requirement. We're going to focus on the last one today, which is the evolving requirements, because those are the ones that are most circumstantial for what it is you're going to be doing. Through requirements 1 for 3, there's a few new things coming out. Oh yeah, well, just quick to note, everything I'm going to say is effective March 2025 unless I've marked it effective immediately. That's what I was talking about, the whole future date thing. And it's considered to be best practice until then, which means you're supposed to be implementing it, but they're not really going to force you until then. One other thing I didn't mention on here that is important to note is in requirement 1, they did a language change. So firewalls and routers is now called network security controls. The reason for that being that it is A, closer to the industry standard language everybody else uses, and B, broader to represent a number of edges we now have in the network. So we've moved forward from a more narrow view of what exactly edge security is. So requirements 1 through 3, one of the new things is you have to have carefully defined roles and responsibilities. This actually comes up in pretty much every one of the requirements, and it's something that's effective immediately. Another one, encryption and storage of sensitive authentication data, or SAD. You have to have it encrypted now between collection and authorization. It used to be encryption only really had to happen through storage and transmission. Now it has to stay encrypted between collection and authorization if there's any storage of it in the middle there. You also have to have control of your primary account number location, its encryption, and masking. Who gets to see what part of it when masked and unmasked, that sort of thing. And if you're using service providers for any kind of payment systems or something like that, you have to get from them documentation on their cryptographic processes, or they at least have to make it available to you on your request. New requirements in requirements 4 through 7, you have to do lifecycle maintenance of certificates. What this means is if you have SSL certs for VPNs or for your website or something like that, you need to do maintenance of them to see when they're expiring, have they expired, their attributes, that sort of thing. They also have a new criteria for evaluation of risk across the environment. Now previously, to put it in layman's terms, PCI DSS had what they would call risky and not so risky areas within the network. And you really only had to set audits for what they would define as the risky areas. Now you need to set a frequency for audits of the not so risky areas as well as the risky areas. Another requirement, very specific one in this case, is you need to have phishing protection. For whatever corporate or company emails you're using, you have to have phishing protection on that in some way, shape, or form. You also need to have security on any public-facing web apps and payment scripts, including things you've made custom. There used to be some wiggle room on that. Now they all have to have some kind of security in front of them. And you also, as part of that roles and responsibilities thing, you need to have identity and access management of some kind to say we're going to positively identify who this is, and we're only going to give them the amount of trust they need and access to just the things they essentially need, so no one's wandering around the network with access to all of your data and all of your information. As far as areas 8 through 12, there is a new requirement for stronger, longer passwords. And they said service providers, if you're using those, they need to set their passwords to a 90-day password rotation. This is actually in conflict with what NIST says is best practice about passwords, but this is what PCI DSS has decided to put into their standard. There's also a requirement for multi-factor authentication for some parts of the environment. I'm not going to detail out in a short video like this what the different parts are, but some parts of the environment are now going to require multi-factor authentication. They say you're going to have to detect, alert, address, and respond to failures of security control systems. That is basic security management and response, I would say. They have to have vulnerability management and penetration testing. So this is new, and I would expect this to be one of the hurdles that a lot of people are going to go through, because if you're a very, very small environment, you might either A, have to obtain documentation just from the service provider, or B, have it either done to you or in some way maintained for you on your own environment. You need to have security awareness training for all of your employees. Now, this can vary based on the size of the environment you're talking about. So obviously, you don't need to get a $20,000 security awareness training suite. If you've got 5 people, you could just do a written one. But it has to be somehow present. And something that's actually in all of the requirements, especially in 8 through 12 though, is you need to have lots of documentation and review of documentation. So that if anybody comes to do an audit, or if anything happens, you can say, here are my processes, here's why, how this happened, this is what we did to try to prevent situations like this from happening. You just have everything documented. And it's worth saying that some of this log review and documentation and all that kind of thing is recommended to be automated. We're not going to unpack that in this video, but that's just know that's a thing that's out there. In terms of implementation, I divide it into 2 categories mentally. So there's things that are policy and paperwork changes, and things that are hardware/software changes. So policy/paperwork changes. Oh, I should say before I start too, the hardware and software changes, some of those are things that can be done manually through policy and paperwork. They would just be much, much slower or harder. And likewise, some of the things like certificate management, those could be done by hardware or software if you have a large number of certificates. Or rather, security awareness training could be done in paper policy. You get the picture. Basically, policies and paperwork changes have to do a lot about identities and that sort of thing. It's your roles and responsibilities. It's documentation from your service providers. It's certificate management, stronger passwords, and documenting every little thing that's going on. The hardware-software changes, these ones pretty much have to be something that's happening with hardware or software, is data encryption, malware protection, secure remote access, and phishing protection. Those are all mentioned somewhere in there as things you need to have, and you pretty much have to do those digitally. As well as identity and access management. If you have a small enough organization where there might just be a couple of people in there, theoretically speaking, you could do it without hardware or software changes, but especially if you've got, cloud services you're using or other reason you need like a universal directory or central authentication or something like that, the IAM and the multi-factor authentication are 2 things you're probably going to have to do through hardware and software. Spoke about security awareness training already. It's easier to get a suite to do it, but if you only got a couple of people, it probably can just be done through policy and paperwork. And vulnerability management penetration testing. That sort of bridges both sides as well, because you can have it done for you as a service. You can do it for yourself by purchasing a suite. There's many different ways to achieve that. You just have to be able to show that, hey, this is the results of penetration testing. These are the vulnerabilities that we saw in our environment, just so we know there's some kind of competent protection going on there. The big thing, though, with implementation is don't go it alone. So I've got a few email addresses, websites listed here. So cybersecurity@ingrammicro.com is our TechForce alias for cybersecurity. There's tons of professionals that monitor that box that can help you out with whatever it is you need done. I am Michael Weir at ingrammicro.com. I'm the guy that's the lead for security frameworks and that sort of things within our TechForce, so I can definitely help you out with anything compliance related. And then we have a site, securitylinecard.com, which lists out all of our security vendors, major security vendors, and what they do, what their product names are, that sort of thing, so you can find something targeted to what it is you need to implement. Other than that, thank you for watching, have a good day, and don't forget to realize the promise of technology.